Hi everyone. So hope everyone is doing well. So in today's discussion, we are going to focus primarily on the acronym terms and jargon that are used by the product management teams or product managers. So, generally speaking, I think if you divide, I think the terminology, product managers actually use different terminologies when they are interacting with different teams. So, if you watched my previous videos on basics, process and design, you would know that a product manager typically interacts with engineering team, design teams, customers, facing teams, marketing, so on and so forth, right? So each of these teams has their own way of communication, and as a product manager, you should be able to communicate and understand what these teams are conveying to you, or what are you trying to convey to them, right? So a lot of the common terms, for example, when you're talking to engineering, would be focused on engineering specifications and terms that engineering understands. So, what are these terms? Let's look at these terms one by one. A bug. What is a bug? I think you'll hear engineers talk a lot about this day in and day out. Bugs are nothing but like unexpected behavior of a code piece, right? So you basically developed a code. It could be a front end code, it could be a back end code, and you want it to perform a certain set of action, but it doesn't. Uh, Maybe it does in certain environment, but it doesn't do it in, let's say the production environment or in the customer environment. So what is it like? It is called a bug, right? Uh, what are stories? Stories are nothing but, I would say, broken down version of requirements. So you have your spec document, or you what you call like a functional document that has the requirement. The stories are nothing but essentially broken down specs, plain and simple. You would also hear sprint, or what I typically call as the development cycle for engineers. And this remains, a commonly used terminology, whether you are interacting with the front end engineers or back end engineers, or quality analysts or quality test engineers, right? So that is what a sprint means, irrespective of the engineering team that you are interacting with. Let's also understand, what does an application programming interface mean. An application programming interface is nothing but, I would say, let's say, a very high level function. Now what is a function? A function is basically, uh, you could call it like an entry point into a piece of code. And essentially it needs, when you're entering a piece of code, you need some parameters, right? So an application programming interface actually allows different systems to interact without having to know everything about that system. So let's take an example, right? Let's say you have a system A that has users information. You have user 1, you have 2, 3, so on and so forth. You have their information. System B is, let's say, just an interface, that can retrieve information from system A and pass it to system C, right? Now, what are these A, B, and C systems? I mean, typically you could, let's say, call system A, let's say, like a travel, or like your cab uh, aggregator app, right? So system A could be your backend database. System B is your mobile application, and system C is the, let's say, the cab itself, like, I mean, the cab app, right? On the person who is driving the cab, or like the person who has the vehicle. So what does this API for this particular system B could look like, right? So if you are using an app uh, on your phone, right? Uh, when you actually do a API call, which means that this system does an API call, it could pass on information like the user ID, the location, and the time, right? I mean, essentially, the user ID would be, let's say, retrieved from system A, uh, or it could directly be generated from system B itself, because every mobile app will have its own ID, and then you can associate it with a user, right? So you will have a user ID, you would also have location ID, your latitude and longitude, right? And then you will have a timestamp, right? So let's say these are the three parameters that you want to pass to system C, right? So system C is essentially your final system that is going to use this information. So system C is nothing but your final system that uses the three parameters to uh, pass on these three parameters to the client interface, which could be another app, let's say for the cab, right? So that is what it is. Okay, and the fifth acronym, I think, for discussions with the engineering team, it's called the PRD, or it could be called an ideation to product documentation. It could be called a requirement documentation. But essentially, the requirement documentation, comprises of different parts, and each of these parts is actually uh, uh, there in the document to help the engineering team understand what is it that they are trying to build, why are they trying to build it, and who is going to use what they are actually going to build. So I think in most cases you could actually do a lot of market analysis to get a sense of what is it that you are trying to build. So you might be building basically, let's say, a mobile app, or you could be building a web app. You could be building a feature. You could be building a capability, which is a set of features. But I think in all of the above cases, what is important is that you provide the market context to your engineering team. Like, why should they actually build out this feature? Who else has built this feature, for example, right? So your market analysis can comprise of competitive analysis, your competitors who are doing similar set of features, how have they done it? Uh, you could probably give some idea of their functionality, right? The functionality that your competitors have built in. Uh, Typically, not more than, I would say, 3 to 5 pages long, but try to also summarize what your competitors are actually doing. Where is the market actually headed? Why are we doing this right now instead of, let's say, 6 months later, right? All of that actually comes into the market analysis. I think uh, if I were to rank it, probably I would rank it 0 uh, in the stack rank. You can probably start your documentation or the requirement doc with this analysis. I think, and then you can basically define the problem statement. What do you mean by the problem statement? I think, generally speaking, the problem statement is that if you were to build or if you were to build out a set of features, then the customer won't have this particular XYZ problem. Example, in case you're building a web app, you probably build, let's say, I don't know, an admin panel, let's say, right? After you log in, onto the next page, let's say you build out an admin panel. If the admin panel is not present, for example, right, what is going to happen? I think if you don't have the admin panel, then not all of your users on the web app will be given an admin access, right? Some will be users, some would be users that inherit properties from other users, so on and so forth, right? So you are trying to build an admin panel that could be your problem statement, right? So what should that admin panel look like? Uh, what is the layout of it? How are users added to it? Are they added by their email IDs, or are they added by a user account number, etc., etc., right? So that could be your problem statement. I think personas is definitely important, because not every feature that you develop will be used by everyone in the your end customer. Your end customer could be, let's say, talking of the similar, let's say, web app. Your end user could be just a simple user who wants to maybe, you let's say, this is a web application that allows you to understand what users are uh, talking about, or let's say document sharing app, right? A web app that allows you to share the document. So personas are important, because admin is one kind of persona, users are different kind of personas, someone who has created the document is another kind of persona, and someone who is a consumer of the document is another kind of persona, right? So you see, I think uh, with this simple application of document sharing, you have at least four personas, right? So you need to highlight that which which persona you are actually catering to, right? And I would put this as, you know on a stack rank of, like, a top two or top three. I think your user stories are sorry, your user stories are actually important, because it helps to break down the problem statement into parts which can be picked up by the engineering team. So I'll get to the details of what do you mean by breaking down the user stories, but just try to understand that a user story is essentially, let's say, a sequence of steps that have to be coded by the engineering team. uh, let's say, for example, you have to construct this admin panel, right? Let's say your admin panel allows you to add users, right? Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, let's say it allows you to kind of add users. Uh, Sorry. Let's say it allows you to add users. Okay. It allows you to define their, roles, let's say, right? It also allows you to add or remove existing users, right? Uh, let's say it also allows you to uh, transfer, let's say, you know users, which could be like, maybe you do an import from another similar software, right? So these are, let's say, some four functionalities that you want to develop in your admin portal. Each of these functionalities, basically, defining users, could go in as a user story. So if I look at this whole admin portal to be ready to be deployed and to be used by my end user, I need to have these four user stories to be completed, right? So these four user stories together will comprise this section of user stories, right? So that is what is meant by user stories. I think KPIs we have touched also in basics, and I think in the process itself, product management process. If you recall, I think KPIs are essentially related to engagement, essentially related to uh, uh, adoption, usage, right? So you have to define your KPIs also in this document. Like, what is it that you will let's say, look as a set of metrics that would help you understand once these user stories are developed that this admin portal, for example, is being used by the uh, your end user, right? What are those set of KPIs? So in your case, it could be maybe like if this is a web application page, you could have the URL of the page, right? And you say that the number of visits, right? Or you could have, if you can track it at an event level, then you could say the number of users added, the number of roles defined, the number of add or remove, clicks, so on and so forth, right? So KPIs allow you to kind of define a funnel, for your feature. And then wherever the drop is happening in the feature, in the funnel, you basically try to find out the reason. So that is what KPIs are meant for. And then finally coming to test cases, right? Essentially, I think test cases are kind of used to define and understand the functionality and the flow. So I am coming to this admin page, let's say from the login page. But what happens if I'm already logged in, right? If I'm logged in, let's say for 10 minutes, right? Do I still get to, if there is a button here that pushes me to this page, would it still be function, right? Do I still get in the admin page, or do I get, let's say, a pop-up message stating that your session is expired, etc., etc., right? I mean, that is one test case. Uh, Test cases specifically for admin user pages would be related to these four stories, right? I mean, the stories that we discussed. It will be related to these four stories and their functionality. So, am I able to add X number of users, right? Am I able to define their roles, right? If you have, let's say, admin role, you have like, your role as a document sharer or a document importer, right? Are you able to perform those roles on those users, right? I mean, so you have 10 users, right? One, let's say, is an admin, the other are defined as like, roles. One is an document sharer, document importer, right? So, are you able to perform those roles when you log in as those users, right? And then add and remove of existing users, right? So you added certain users now. Do you see the change in the number of users, right, in your DB or wherever you're tracking, right? So test cases are essentially used to confirm the functionality of your user stories outcomes. So that is, how QAs essentially will test out. You could have your testing team, essentially engineering testing team, that could look into this. So, these are, I would say, some of the acronyms that you should be aware, while you're talking to the engineering team.